Welcome to the weekly discussion of how the technology of today impacts the world of tomorrow. This is the Fill in the Blank podcast, and I'm Ross Strader, joined by my co-host Keith Abels. And you can follow us on Twitter at AskFITB or email us fitbpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to know that you're listening and what you think about the Fill in the Blank podcast. Keith, how are you?
I just ate a bunch of Mexican food, but I'm fine otherwise. How are you?
I'm good. So, Mexican restaurant, what do you order? What is your dish of choice?
I normally go with some sort of enchilada variant. You know, there's a billion different possibilities there. So, but I'm trying to eat a little better these days. I've had a good week diet-wise. But I got like chicken enchiladas, nothing crazy.
Do you get the sour cream sauce on it?
I did, actually.
I'm a sucker for sour cream chicken enchiladas.
Yeah, there's not really an enchilada that I won't eat, honestly. I ate more than I probably should have, but I've had a good week, so hopefully this is my one and only cheat meal. We'll see.
Well, here's what I did. So I started my weight loss program with a stomach virus.
That'll do it.
Yeah, I decided I was going to capitalize on that since I haven't eaten in 2 days. And I think I expelled from my body things that I have eaten, probably things I ate when I was 10 years old, to be honest with you. That's the way that it felt. I don't know how long it's been since you've had a stomach virus. It's been a long time. I had the flu a couple of years ago. I was pretty sick then. But I haven't had a stomach virus in 12 years, 15 years, where you were tied to the bathroom in your house and your body was waging war against you. And I haven't had one of those in a long time. And yesterday, my body spent an entire day at war with me. That's the way I'd say it.
Wow. Things just got real on the Fill in the Blank podcast.
Yeah, no, I hate that. But I haven't had any sour cream chicken enchiladas.
You may want to hold off on those for a while until you're all the way recovered.
I do. I can't even imagine.
But what we call that these days, Ross, we call that a cleanse. Just tell your friends and family, I just doing a cleanse for the last few days.
I did. I had a cleanse. That is a very right way to say that. So,
yep.
Anyways, I'm glad to be back in the land of the living and maybe land of the eating in a couple of days. That's my plan.
Well, welcome back. We should celebrate with some enchiladas when you're ready.
We should, yeah. I'll be ready for that. Thankfully, that wasn't my meal just before I got the stomach bug.
Amen. Well,
I know. Well, there you go.
I think we should talk about something else.
We should talk about something else.
You know what'll make you feel better?
What?
Talking about the new MacBook Pro.
I know. I've been very excited to see it. In fact, I talked to a friend of mine who does sort of high-end video tech, sound stuff, production stuff, does music videos. In fact, he's a guy who used to be he was one of the original producers of the VH1 Behind the Music. Do you remember that? VH1 Behind the Music?
I do. That was good. Why isn't he helping us with our show?
Well, I don't know.
He must not be that good of a friend. We could use the audio engineering help, quite frankly.
Yeah, we certainly could. He could probably set us up with just stuff laying around on the floor in his office. Would be an upgrade from what we have. Although we have fine equipment, he just has excellent equipment.
Yep.
But I was talking to him about him because he's a Mac guy. He's one of those guys that says, the 2015 Mac was the best Mac they've ever had, and all that stuff. But he was very excited, so I saw him just the other night. We were working on a project together, and he was telling me about his excitement for the i9, the processor, the speed, all that stuff. He's still disappointed that you are not allowed to put your own video card in it, and so he has some issues there. But he hasn't upgraded his Mac since 2015, but he was very much looking at the i9 processor because of MacBook Pro's new, Generation 8 i9 processor. But I wonder if he's read the things that we've read.
Well, it's kind of a good news, bad news situation right now. Over the last week, as these devices have gotten out into the wild, of course, they get the benchmark treatment right off the bat from nerds all over the place, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so the first one to gain some steam was a YouTuber. His name's Dave Lee. I don't know Dave. But he was conducting these tests with Adobe Premiere. And so what he noticed in his tests is that when he was running Adobe Premiere, the MacBook Pro, this is the i9 version. It is not on all of them. It's the 15-inch i9 version only that this seems to be an issue. And he's got the fully loaded processor in there, the 2.9 gigahertz 6-core i9 processor.
Which remind us real quick, you said the price tag on that? It was north of $5,000, right?
If you max out the 15-inch MacBook Pro, you're at $6,800, I believe.
God.
Now, you can get the i9 processor in a lower spec machine if you don't have as big of a hard drive and less memory and all that. But my guess is once you're up in that territory, you might as well just go all out anyway, right?
Sure, you're not bargain shopping at that point.
Exactly. I'm sure most people are kind of going big or not going at all with that kind of machine. So what he noticed when he was running this Adobe Premiere test was that the MacBook Pro with the i9 did not apply the turbo boost that gives you the higher clock speed when you have a demanding task running, right?
Right.
And so what it actually did was drop the speed all the way down as far as 2.2 gigahertz. Now, this is a 2.9 gigahertz chip. That's below the base level for the chip, right? So the turbo boost should be able to take you above the normal base level. This actually takes you far below the base level. But here's where it gets interesting. He did the same test, and put his MacBook Pro in a freezer, and it worked fine.
See, what kind of budget do these YouTube guys have that they can buy these tricked out machines, run it, and then say, hey, I think I want a freezer to put it in, and then run it?
I don't know. Their budget must be different than ours.
It's different than our budget. I would just say that.
They might have more people subscribing on Patreon. So 9to5Mac, so I'll put a link in the show notes to the 9to5Mac article I'm referring to here. They also ran, so once this came out, they started running tests, and they used Final Cut Pro, which is Apple's video editing software.
Yes.
And so they replicated his results, this extreme throttling of the i9 processor. And then when they put the machine in the freezer, so apparently there's a 9to5Mac freezer, they got a significant speed boost. So this is purely a thermal issue, it appears. So something in this machine thinks it's getting too hot, or it actually is getting too hot. And so it has to drop the performance or the clock speed on that processor way down below what people are expecting. That's a very big deal, because you're buying this machine if you need the most processing power you can get in a laptop form factor, period. And so for this not to deliver that is a very big deal, especially for those dropping $5,000, $6,000, almost $7,000 on this machine. It needs to run as advertised. So that has been quite the story over the last few days. We talked about this last week, and we're both really excited about these new processors in the new MacBook Pros, or the 13 and the 15-inch MacBook Pros with Touch Bar. But this obviously created some blowback with Apple, which is not unusual these days.
It's not. I wonder how many more chances Apple's going to get with the prosumer, because this was their answer to the prosumer. Here's a MacBook Pro that, should run your Premiere Pro software as well as the desktop, and right out of the bat, you have guys that have already discovered it does not do what it says it's going to do.
Yeah, I don't know. The thing is, if you like Mac OS, you don't really have another option, and they know that. If you want Mac OS, you've got to get a Mac of some sort.
Which really, in that world, means that you really want to run Apple software, because Adobe's going to run across platforms. Avid, which is the other, big, movie editing software, it runs on both platforms. And so this is not great news for Mac. I think it's kind of disappointing.
It is, but here's the silver lining. Normally, when things like this happen, Apple does their normal thing where they kind of ignore it, or they say, no, that's not really a problem. It's only a few isolated incidents, whatever. But in this case, they've actually already released a fix for it. So I'm going to read to you a statement from Apple regarding this issue. Following extensive performance testing under numerous workloads, we've identified that there's a missing digital key. I don't know what a digital key is. In the firmware that impacts the thermal management system and could drive clock speeds down under heavy thermal loads on the new MacBook Pro. So they say, yes, this is actually happening, which they need to, because we've got people on video showing it happening. So at least they're not denying that part. A bug fix is included in today's macOS High Sierra 10.13.6 supplemental update and is recommended. So within a week of this thing launching and a few days of this becoming a story, they solved the problem and put out a fix. So I think that hopefully solves the issue, number one, for people that spent the money on these machines. But then also, number two, shows a willingness for them to move a little faster when issues like this come up. So to me, is it a long-term issue? Probably not. They fixed it, and they fixed it in a matter of days, which is pretty impressive. But you're right, they do seem to kind of keep stumbling out of the blocks on a lot of their pro-level devices anyway. I can imagine if something like this happened on an iPhone, to where they had a major performance issue on the brand new iPhone, everybody in that company would stop whatever they were doing and try to fix this as fast as they could, because that's their bread and butter. is the iPhone. But anything non-iPhone related seems to have a lot of issues out of the gate.
It does. Well, and it brings up two thoughts. So one of the thoughts is it does seem that there's a heat issue because if you put it in the freezer, it doesn't, that doesn't happen, which tells me, man, these laptops are getting hot. And so you can fix the key where it doesn't throttle itself down. I don't know that that necessarily fixes that the laptop is not going to be smoking hot. So
I wouldn't use this on your lap.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Honestly,
think that's a good thing to do.
This needs to be on your desk. But, you mentioned your friend who's going to help us with our audio.
Yes.
You mentioned that he was, he's still disappointed that you can't really get a more modern video card in one of these things. And
right.
Apple laptops are notoriously terrible with video cards. However, they did release, in conjunction with these new MacBook Pros, an external GPU that they partnered with Blackmagic, which makes incredible video equipment. They're making an external GPU so you can offload the graphics processing to this external unit, and that should help out quite a bit with that. So at least that is an option, whereas before you could get external GPUs, but this one was co-designed with Blackmagic and Apple so that it is optimized for running on these new MacBook Pros. So I think that's encouraging. And what your friend may already know that, may not. But if he doesn't, that would be a good thing to pass on to him. Probably already does, though, if he's in that business.
But it does give me a reason to call him and pass on that information.
That's true.
And
you should mention, I was talking about this on my show the other night.
That's right. Yes. My international podcast.
That's right.
Yes. The second thing it brings me to say is that if Kenmore or Maytag or Samsung or any top-of-the-line freezer maker wants to donate a freezer to fill in the blank, we will find some things to test in and outside of that freezer.
Yeah, but in case we can't, go ahead and send us a fully loaded 15-inch MacBook Pro.
Yes, yeah.
Put that in the freezer.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll be happy to run those tests and even talk about the freezer brand that you sent us. We're happy to do that.
Yep. It's really cold. We recommend it.
That's right. It will freeze your beer in under 30 minutes.
It will freeze your beer and cool down your MacBook Pro at the same time. Thanks for listening to the Fill in the Blank podcast. We hope you're enjoying the show. We encourage all of our listeners to support us at patreon.com/FITB. Patreon allows you to support our show completely on your terms, whether it's $1 an episode, $1 a month, or $10 a year. You get to decide. To support the show, simply go to patreon.com/FITB to make your contribution. Thank you so much for listening to the Fill in the Blank podcast, and now back to the show.
Okay, well, that was the MacBook Pro. We talked about its throttling issues. It'll be interesting to see if there's more that comes up in the next couple of weeks as this continues to be tested out in the real world. But this brings us to another interesting conversation, and it's not Apple this time, it's Google. So you've got Apple, you've got Alphabet, which is Google's stock name, you've got Amazon, you've got several of these companies that are in a race to be the first $1 trillion company. That'll probably happen by the end of the year is what all the analysts say. But on the heels of some of these companies, so Apple, Google, Amazon, you have an aggressive European Union antitrust division. Let's call it that. So they've got the MI5. They also have the European Union antitrust division, and they are going after Silicon Valley and have just made the news by what appears to be an unprecedented fine against Google.
Oh, yeah. So the EU fined Google $5 billion this week for what they consider anti-competitive and antitrust behavior. And there's multiple reasons tied to their decision. Before we get into the decision, though, this is a European Union regulatory body of some sort. So I don't know exactly what their authority is, but clearly they have the authority to do this. They did have a hearing or trial or whatever you call it when it's not actually in a court. And of course, Google is appealing this ruling. And when they appeal it, they actually do go to a court. So this regulatory body came up with this fine, and that was a decision made outside of a court, as best as I understand how this works in the EU. I am not super familiar with how they work, since you have individual country level governmental decisions, and then you also have these overarching issues that are tied to the EU as a whole.
Right. And just to put it in perspective, so this is 2018, but if you roll the clock back to 2008, this same entity, this European Union antitrust, fined Microsoft 899 million euros. Okay, so it probably turns out to be, what is
that? A little over $1 billion.
A little over $1 billion. So they fined Microsoft twice, 2008, 2013. They fined Intel in 2009 for over $1 billion. Last year, they fined Facebook for a paltry 110 million euro. And then this is the latest, but by far the largest fine that they've exacted.
The Facebook one doesn't bother me.
No,
I'm just kidding. I don't even remember what it's for. I just don't like Facebook, so that doesn't bother me. It
feels like it should have been 110 billion euros, not million euros.
It should.
I mean, he could pay that cash. You know what I'm saying?
Well, speaking of that, there's an article in Bloomberg, and we'll put this in there in the show notes as well. But in the article from Bloomberg, it just happens to mention, it's the best one sentence in the whole article, because it says Google owner Alphabet Incorporated generated about the same amount of money, the $5 billion, as the penalty every 16 days in 2017, based on the company's reported annual revenue of $110.9 billion. So this is the equivalent of 16 days worth of revenue for Google. Now, that's a lot. $5 billion is $5 billion. That's a lot of money.
Sure, it is.
It's the issue for Google is not necessarily the fine, which they'll be able to recover from, no problem. But they are also forced to change some of their business practices within 90 days. Now, how that works if they're appealing it, I don't exactly know. Right. So, we'll have to see what actually happens there. But the issue from the EU is this. They've got a couple of issues. They want Google, the EU wants Google to stop requiring smartphone manufacturers like Samsung and LG stop requiring smartphone manufacturers to pre-install the Chrome browser and making Google's search engine the default. That's one of the biggest issues. Okay. Another issue cited in this is that they want Google to stop banning phone manufacturers from using unofficial or what we call forked versions of Android on their devices. So what that means is this. Number one, Google does offer a fully generic non-Google app version of Android to anybody that wants to use it for free. So if you've ever used a Kindle Fire tablet, that's running Android.
Right.
It doesn't have any Google services on it at all because it's stripped down. So right now Google has the business model of, if you're going to use Android and you want the Google Play Store on there for apps and things like that, you have to get all the Google stuff on there. So that means Chrome, that means Google Maps, that means all Google apps, right? So you can do the fully loaded Android version that has all the Google stuff pre-installed. Or you can do a fully unloaded version, which is a clean version of Android with no Google services, no Google apps at all. They already give that choice. And it's completely free either way you go.
Right.
So Samsung doesn't have to pay for Android, just like Amazon doesn't have to pay for Android. So the fine here, two things. Number one, wanting them to stop requiring manufacturers to pre-install Chrome, and also Google making and the Google search engine being the default. That's a very Microsoft kind of thing. The U.S. government did this with Microsoft in the, whenever that was. Was it the early 2000s?
It was.
Was it 90s? I can't remember when that was, but that was a very big deal, the antitrust case against Microsoft. And it was all about bundling the Internet Explorer browser with Windows. That was the whole thing. And of course, Microsoft had to stop doing it. It was so far past the point where Internet Explorer was already the dominant search engine, at least at the time, that it didn't really matter. It cost a lot of money for the government to do this. Microsoft maintained its dominant market share for quite a while until mobile emerged. And then, of course, nobody uses Internet Explorer anymore.
Right.
Including Microsoft. They moved on. But this is the exact same thing. This is what the U.S. did to Microsoft not that long ago. We don't want you to bundle in your Chrome browser. We want to give people choice. The fact of the matter is people already have a choice. They can go install whatever browser they want. So then it brings us to the search engine. I think the issue with the search engine from the EU's point of view is this. Google has such dominant market share in Europe with search. I want to say, Ross, the last time I looked, they had 90+% market share in search.
Wow.
So nobody's even close. There's a lot of third parties out there that you can use for search, but I'll be honest with you, none of them are as good as Google. So you do have a choice. You can use any search engine you want. It is the default on the Android phone because it's made by Google. I don't really blame them for putting their browser and their search engine on there, especially when they're giving manufacturers the ability to make a fully unloaded version of it. Now, here's the one caveat. They do not allow you to do, Google does not allow, if you're a manufacturer like Samsung, you can't make both versions. You can't make a Samsung version that has all the Google stuff on it, and you can't make a Samsung version that is completely unloaded without any of it. You have to do one or the other. That is part of this. I think that they should stop doing. Now, Google's business reason for that, they said, is it creates a lot of confusion in the market. So if you're buying a Samsung phone and you're not sure which version of Android you're getting, that could be confusing to consumers. At least that's what their argument is.
Right.
Whether that's the case or not, I don't know. I'm sure Samsung could educate consumers or market those towards different types of audiences or whatever. But so I don't mind that part of it, where if I'm Samsung, if I'm Google and I'm saying, hey, Samsung, you can either do one or the other, you can't do both. I'm thinking, well, why not? I'm making the hardware. Your OS is free either way. What do you care?
Right.
So that one I do agree with. But in general, I am not a fan of this particular decision against Google. I'm not anti-regulation. I think this one, I mean, okay, if anything, if you're saying it's anti-competitive, but they give companies two choices. Number one, they're building in some competition with their own product right off the bat. And if you compare that to a company like Apple, who gives customers no choice, everything's pre-installed on your Apple phone, on your iPhone, so you have what web browser is on there? Safari. Can you take it off? Well, now you can. Yeah, originally you couldn't. Now you can. And you can put a different one on there like Chrome, like I have on mine. I'm sure you have Chrome on yours as well.
Yeah.
You can put on multiple search engines, but the default is whatever Apple tells you it is. If you want iOS on a different kind of phone, can you get it? No. It has to be on an Apple phone.
Right.
So if anything, I would think that Google's in a better position to create competition than Apple is. The difference is Google and Android have such dominant market share across Europe, much more so than here in the U.S., where I don't know if Apple's dominant, but it's a lot closer, maybe 50-50. In Europe, it's not even close. And most of this, I think, is just a cost-related thing. As in, the rest of the world is more Android-heavy than iOS-heavy, just mainly due to costs and options. So I don't necessarily agree with this decision.
But don't you think, even if you're getting a phone that has no Google on it, so you don't have the Play Store, you don't have, the maps, you don't have Chrome, even if you get that phone, don't you think the first downloads that you download on the phone are Chrome and Google Maps? And it's not as though people aren't going to go and download those. It's not as though that's still not is what going to be used.
No, I agree with you.
Maybe I'm totally wrong about that.
No, I don't think this solves a problem. Honestly, I think the reason Google has so much market share is because they make a superior product. Why does everybody use Google Search? Because it works better.
It does work better.
It just works better. I've tried every search engine there is out there, and most of them are not great. They're not all terrible, but they're not as good as Google.
No, not by any means.
It just works better. I mean, when I get a new phone, the first thing I do is load it up with Google apps.
Right.
Plain and simple. One of the things I'm most excited about in iOS 12 is the fact that I can use Google Maps and Waze, which is owned by Google, in CarPlay in my car. So I can get a better map than Apple Maps, which Apple Maps is better, but it's not as good as Google and Waze. I can tell you that.
Well, and even if you take your Apple phone and you jailbreak it, I don't even know if anybody jailbreaks their phones anymore, but I mean, Apple penalizes you. I mean, they have such a closed garden, they don't even let you open a window in your garden. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So
no,
I don't understand it. I don't understand
I agree.
it.
So, this is a lot of money, but more so than the money is them changing their actual practices. What that would lead to if this actually gets implemented, I don't know. But they have already appealed this decision, and so it will go to court. But according to this ruling or this judgment, they've got 90 days to implement the practice. And then this EU commission said, we're not going to tell you how to do it. You just need to do it.
And it just makes you wonder. So these companies that operate around the world, now they make, they're subject to, and it's always been that way. And I guess that's part of the cost of doing business if you're a tech company. But who regulates the EU antitrust? Is there some authority that sits above them, or can they arbitrarily go after tech companies and make these decisions? And if you want to do business in Europe, this is, you have to do business according to their standards.
Well, I mean, I guess well, if you're going to appeal to someone like Google is, they're appealing to whatever court would hear it. So there is a legal entity above and beyond this commission that will hear it. I would not necessarily expect much of a change when they do the appeal, but you never know. I mean, I don't know. The rule and the laws are different in different parts of the world too. So I don't really know. I don't have enough information and I'm not knowledgeable enough with these types of decisions. But what we do know, I think what we can agree on, Ross, is that the EU is certainly more consumer oriented in its laws and regulations in protecting consumers, whereas a country like ours in the U.S. is certainly more business friendly. And, so their default position comes from the, standpoint of business practices and kind of market regulation, not government regulation.
Right.
Whereas the EU is not. And so, that's a cultural difference. And I'm not saying one's right, one's wrong. It's certainly an issue by issue thing where, I'm sure the EU's gotten it right and gotten it wrong sometimes. And, the US has gotten it right and gotten it wrong sometimes too. So I'm not necessarily arguing for or against one of them, but I mean, clearly those are kind of the default positions, consumer versus, business.
Well, this will make you feel good, I think, that you and Donald Trump see it the same way. So I know that's important to you. So his Twitter the other day said, and I'm going to quote this, all right, just because I know it'll warm your heart. So begin quotations. "I told you so, exclamation point. The European Union just slapped a $5 billion fine on one of our great companies, Google. They truly have taken advantage of the U.S., but not for long, exclamation point, close quotes."
So 2 questions.
Yeah.
Number 1, were all the words spelled correctly?
They were in this article. I don't know.
In the tweet.
In the tweet, so they quoted the tweet, but I have no idea if Reuters, which is where I'm reading this.
If they quoted the tweet, they wouldn't have changed anything.
Okay, well, it looks like they're all, and it even looks grammatically punctuated correctly.
Okay, he didn't write that. Somebody else wrote that for him.
It's very possible.
The second question, were any of those in all caps, like the threat that he made to the Iranian government? Was any of that tweet
No all caps, but we did have 2 exclamation points, so...
Yeah, but I think the gratuitous exclamation point is whatever handler was sending out that. If it was all spelled correctly and with proper punctuation,
yes,
then somebody else wrote that.
Well, he labeled the European Union as a foe with regard to trade. So there's that.
All right, I changed my mind. I agree with the EU. Fine them.
Well,
I'm just kidding. I still disagree with it. I mean,
So Al Gore, he's against the EU too. So it seems like this is an American philosophy, American business values.
Well, I think there is a certain amount of fear around the world of the disproportionate leverage and power that the American tech companies have. And I don't know that that's unfounded.
Right.
Is it right or wrong? It's not for me to say. It's for me to say, in my own opinion as it applies to me, but, to tell another country or set of countries what they should do, well, I mean, that's kind of up to them, right?
It is. No, sure, it is up to them. But it is interesting. We certainly, if you live in America and you hear these kinds of things, it's not seemingly what this public or this business culture has an appetite for. And so when we hear about it in another place, it seems foreign to us. It seems, egregious to us, and it must not to the rest of the world. That's just an interesting thought.
I just want to know if they think this is harming competition. What map service are you going to go download that's better than Google Maps? What other services are you going to go get that are better?
You're not. I mean, Apple spent a ton of money and a lot of time and even, carted it out at one of their presentations on their maps. And it doesn't hold a candle to Google Maps.
I mean, none of it does. I mean, if you get a fully
Let's say
stripped
Apple.
down...
I meant Google. I meant Apple. Yeah. Whatever.
If you get a fully stripped down kind of Android phone that doesn't have any Google services on it,
right,
the first thing you're going to go do is like you said, go download a bunch of Google stuff because that's what works. That's what's better.
I know. Everybody uses Gmail. I mean, for right or wrong, Google has a monopoly But it's so weird because you don't have to pay for any of their services. So, they're the winners.
Yeah.
They figured it all. Of course, we had another show about that. But
yep. All right. So it sounds like we're in agreement here that we both are not fans of this fine, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right.
All
Whatever Trump says, Keith says. That's what we can take away from this show.
You have to stop.
Sorry. It's not a show about politics and the politics today affecting the world tomorrow. It's not about that.
God, I hope there is a world tomorrow at this rate.
Hey, speaking of worlds tomorrow, Keith, what is your fill-in-the-blank check this week, my man?
Okay, mine is Orange Theory Fitness.
All right.
So I started a new workout regimen recently, and so I was doing some research. I was considering hiring a personal trainer, and I was going to, go to this trainer for a little bit and have them kind of help me get started on a routine, and then I would probably just take over from there and kind of do my own thing. And so as I was researching different trainers and just different gyms and all this stuff, and I really don't want to join a gym. So I was doing this, and I came across Orange Theory, which blew up a couple of years ago, and they're all over the place. I think they just opened their 1,000th location. And we have one near my house. I mean, it takes me like 5 minutes to get there. And it's been there for a couple of years. And I drive by it all the time, and I thought, what is that? What is Orange Theory? And I never really looked into it. But when I was starting to look at, trainers and gyms and all these things, I came across Orange Theory. So I did some research on it and decided to go give it a try. And since then, I've been hooked. And so what Orange Theory is, it's not a traditional gym to where you go and they've got a big weight room and, you go lift your weights and do your thing, take a shower and get out of there. This is more of a place where you go do a class with a trainer and then you leave after your hour class is up. So it's not like an open gym where you just go do what you want. So let me start with the name Orange Theory. So there's this theory that during your exercise workout, so let's take an hour workout. They've got these different zones, right? And these that represent the different levels of your heart rate. Okay. And so the high end of your heart rate would be orange and then red. Makes sense, right? So as you go up, red means you're kind of maxed out on heart rate. Orange is just one level below that. And so you've got these 3 other levels beneath that, and those are as you're getting warmed up and such. But the Orange Theory is that if you spend at least 12 minutes or more in the orange or red zone over the course of your hour-long workout, then that is what triggers your body to get into this extensive kind of fat burning or calorie burning period the following 36 hours. So I've read stories, I've read articles that say the science proves that this is a real thing. I've read some that said, really, what you do during the workout is the most important, and we don't really know if you're going to get 36 hours worth of afterburn or not. But what I do know, Ross, is since I've been going, I've been burning a hell of a lot of calories, at least during my workout.
Yeah.
And it's forced me, because I'm spending so much time and energy in these workouts, it's forced me to change my eating habits a little bit, except for tonight when I had Mexican food. But, change my eating habits so that the work I'm putting in my Orange Theory classes isn't going to waste, and that I'm kind of getting the most out of that. So here's what I like about it. Number one, they've got classes throughout the day. You can go early morning or you can go in the evening after work, which I prefer to go after work. Most people are morning people, but I like to go after work. So you've got these hour-long classes all throughout the day. You can pick whatever class you want to go to. And so you go, they've got a different workout every single day. Now, each Orange Theory gym has has the same workout across the country, or in multiple countries now, I think. So everybody at every Orange Fitness does the same workout each day. But every day of the year, it's different. So if I go to my local Orange Theory today, and you went to an Orange Theory in another city, we'd be doing the exact same workout. So
really?
So they're consistent, and they have this, this plan where every gym, every location does the same workout. So you have a trainer there, and the trainer is very good about giving you instructions. So, for example, before every exercise that you do, they show you how to do it. Okay. And they actually have these big screens stationed throughout the gym that actually has a video of showing you how to do it. So after your trainer leaves and, they're helping other people the whole time because there's a room full of people here, and you need a tip on how to do it, you can look up at the screen and it shows you how to do it, which is really nice, right? It's kind of handy to have a visual reminder of the technique that you're supposed to be using to do whatever exercises that you're doing. And so I like that. So they're very good about explaining what to do, how to do it, and then coming around and checking on you as you're doing these things. The thing I like the most about this, Ross, is during the entire workout, your heart rate and the zone that you're in is displayed up on a big board, on a big screen, and they have them positioned throughout the gym. So you can look up at any given point and see, am I in the orange zone? Am I in the red zone? Where am I? And you can see how many calories you've burned. You can see how many minutes you've been in the orange and red. And so you get this like real-time dashboard that gives you feedback about how you're doing throughout your workout. So you know, I need to push myself a little bit more, or, I'm good right where I am. And that real-time feedback has made a big difference to me, because there's a lot of times where you think like, oh no, this is the most I can do. And you look and you're like, no, you're not even into the orange zone yet. It's like, no, I can do more. And it forces you to push yourself a little bit harder so that you do achieve the result that you're trying to achieve. So I love the classes. The trainers have been super supportive. I like that it's so close to me. I like that they give you lots of data. At the end of every workout, I get an email, and the app it has an app. Of course it does, because everybody has an app. All of your data, your workout data, is loaded into your app, so you can see calories burned. You can see your heart rate for the entire hour. You can see all kinds of data about your workout. It's just really easy. And you show up. You don't have to do anything else. You just show up and they do everything for you. They've got great equipment. It's a clean place. You've got your stats. You've got your real-time feedback. And then you're done with your hour and you're out. That's it. So I've gone to 7 or 8 classes. So I signed up. I joined. There's no contract, which is nice because I don't like gym contracts. So you can stop anytime you want. But it's been a really good experience so far. And my plan is to stick with it. And I'm going to try to go at least 3 times a week. And, for the last week and a half since I've tried it, then I've been able to do that. So Orange Theory Fitness is my new favorite thing.
Have you noticed so you've had to change your eating habits, and I'm sure part of that's so you have enough energy, you're getting enough calories. Because, this is not a video podcast. So if you were looking at Keith and I, you'd say, Ross is probably the one that should have joined Orange Theory, because you're a pretty fit guy. You've always kind of stayed in shape. You've always been active. So, what about Orange Theory for you is different than, you used to play some soccer, you used to run. I mean, there's a lot of things that you've done in the past. How does this compare to some of the other things you've done?
Well, so I've always been able to run. Like if you need me to go run 2 miles right now, no problem. I can go do it. No matter what kind of shape I've been in, I could always run. And, I grew up playing soccer, and that's mainly an endurance sport. So I've never had any problems running. Where I'd never really spent enough time was in weight training of any kind. Yeah. So what this does is it balances those two things. So half of your class, half of your hour-long session is spent in some weight training, and then the other half is spent in running on a treadmill, and they take you through these various levels of running. And you don't have to be a runner. You can be a walker. They have every exercise is adapted to whatever level you are. Mm-hmm. So I'm at in the treadmills, for example, there's walker, jogger, and runner. I'm considered a jogger at the pace that I go and those sorts of things. So whichever of those levels you associate with, and you get to decide, they don't decide for you. You get to decide. Then you have a certain amount of things that you do for that level. What I like about it is that it's equal amounts weight training with the cardio of the running. And so I like to do the weight training half first, because I know when I get on that treadmill, I'm going to be just fine. I don't have to worry about the running part of it. Where I do struggle is in the weight side of it. And so hopefully I can build that up. And that's a big part of what I want to do is some weight training. So I like the balance, and I like the fact that there is a trainer there that is really supportive and helps you with technique and making sure you're doing things safely. If you just go to a gym and start working out, maybe there's somebody there, maybe they're not, to help you with weights and make sure that you're doing the proper thing. Because if you don't, you're going to hurt yourself. Mm-hmm. And the other part too is like, where do I start? Is this too heavy? Is this too light? And with a trainer, then they can help you with that too. And they say, let's start with this and see how you do. And then they can move you up or down a little bit. So I like the balance of the types of exercise. It's fast paced. There's this music blaring throughout. They've got good music there, by the way, too. You've got the instructional videos. You've got I mean, all of it. It's just all those things come together in a way that's just really helpful for me in the way that I like to work out. Is it for everybody? Probably not. But it does check a lot of the boxes for me.
Man, that's great. All right. Orange Theory. And I guess you'll put a link in there. And
I will.
I mean, anybody that hasn't done it can probably go, do a free workout, try out?
You can do a free trial, which is what I did. I went on a Friday night after work and did a free night. And that night I signed up. I said, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this. And I've been holding myself accountable to do it. I even told my boss at work that I was going to do it. And I said, okay, when we get together every couple of weeks and do reviews and stuff like that, I want you to ask me about this. And I want you to hold me accountable and ask me if I'm, still going to my Orange Theory classes.
Hey, man, that's great.
I kind of need accountability. It's helpful when you work out to have an accountability partner.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to build those in. My wife is one of those, which she puts me to shame with the way that she works out, but I'm trying to catch up with her. So I'm building in those little accountability mechanisms throughout my life to hopefully keep me going if I ever decide to slack off a little bit.
That's great. That's great.
So we mentioned earlier, is the world going to end tomorrow?
We did mention that.
Maybe a better question, Ross, is the world getting better or is it getting worse?
Well, it's funny you should ask that question because my blank check actually answers that question, Keith. Or anyways, takes a stab at it. I don't know if you read The New Yorker, but my blank check for the week is The New Yorker. It's one of my favorite publications. We have a subscription. Now, the problem with The New Yorker is it really is so good, but it's very dense. It comes out every week, and it has just a ton of great articles. And I do not have the reading discipline to keep up with a weekly subscription to The New Yorker. But I usually try to pick one or two articles out of it that I think are interesting and read those when I can, off and on during the week. And I'll tell you so The New Yorker is sort of my blank check, and the teaser for The New Yorker is an article or one of their, publications, one of their posts in The New Yorker that was not this week. So June 30th is the newest one that's already, or July 30th is already out. This is July the 23rd, okay? And the name of the title of the article is The Big Question. And the subtitle is the world getting better or worse? So just listen to this for a second. I found this really fascinating, and then we can talk about it if you want to. But the whole idea, the premise that the guy is making, and the writer of this is Joshua Rothman, and I think he's the archive editor for The New Yorker. So he's a smart guy. All the guys that write all the men and women that write for New Yorker are very smart. They're the top of their fields. And it's very fascinating. And so he cites in this, a couple of paragraphs of setting it up, and then he cites in it a piece that was done by a guy named Steve Pinker. He's a cognitive scientist, okay? And the article that Steve Pinker wrote was called Enlightenment Now, the Case for Reason, Science, Humanism, and Progress, all right? Now, just listen to this. There's a couple of really fascinating things about the introduction of Pinker and the introduction of this article. And the one thing he says is that he looks at recent studies and finds the majorities in 14 countries. Now, here are the countries: Australia, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Great Britain, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Norway, Singapore, Sweden, Thailand, and the UAE, and the United States, okay? And in all of those 14 countries, the recent study shows that the people living there believe that the world is getting worse rather than better. Okay? Maybe no surprise. Okay. Maybe that's a general sentiment of everybody in the world. Everything's getting worse. Parenthetically, he says, China is the only large country which a majority express optimism. If you can believe that or not.
I tend to I would believe that because so many people in China are being lifted out of poverty at such a rapid rate based on their economic growth. But that would be the only thing I would tie that to.
Well, that's exactly right. So here's what he says, and I'm quoting Pinker here. This bleak assessment of the state of the world is wrong. And he says it's not just a little wrong, it's wrong. It's flat earth wrong, okay? Now, and he goes on. I'm going to just read it. So I'll just set this up for a sec, and then, you can ask me about it if you want. He says, because our ideas about human progress are so vague, it's tempting to think they don't matter. But is life getting better or worse? Maybe dorm room debate with consequences. And then he goes on, and I think one of the fascinating things is he says this. He says, the message is simple. Progress is real, meaningful, and widespread. The mystery is why we have so much trouble acknowledging it. Pinker mentions various sources of pessimism. The progressophobia is what he calls it, of liberal arts professors, for instance. He directs most of his comments, though, towards the media, which focus entirely on the of-the-moment crises and systematically underreport positive long-term trends. And one of the things he cites is that the extreme poverty rate fell by 137,000 people since yesterday and has every day for the last 25 years. And he also says there's this idea of sentiment mining, a word analysis technique that tracks the mood of people. And people think, oh, well, there's always been the good old days, and now is never the good old days. And he says the power of bad news is magnified by a mental habit of what psychologists call available heuristic, which means information that's available now. People tend to estimate the probability of an event by means of the ease with which instances come to mind. They get the impression that mass shootings are more common than medical breakthroughs, and we're guilty of the sin of ingratitude. We like to complain, and we don't know much about the heroic problem solvers of the past. How much have you thought of, he cites this stuff, billions of lives are being saved all of the time. And so it's just this fascinating article where he says, we all believe the world is getting worse, and he thinks the reason is because we are an ungrateful society that is not able to look at all of the positive things that are happening.
What do you think about that? What's your take on this?
Well, so I don't know. I think that probably every generation has had an easier time looking at what is wrong with the world than what's right with the world. And so I think it's like anything. I think it's in hindsight that we celebrate the successes of the past more than we do in the present, and we tend to focus on the negative of the present. So I think we can do that in our lives as well, just individually. But then, on the one hand, I think there is a sense in which, you have to come to one conclusion that says, the Industrial Revolution, man, people thought the Industrial Revolution was going to solve everything, and it created its own set of problems. And I think people thought the tech revolution was going to, solve all sorts of things. Our work hours were going to be less, we were going to work less during the week. All of these things were going to be done by machine and make life easier. And what we've seen is the entire opposite effect, is that life's not easier. Life seems more busy. Life seems more disconnected. And so I think the saviors that each generation looks to, whether it's industry or technology or information, those things don't ever prove to be the saviors that we think they're going to be. And so our experience is that we are dissatisfied in the now because we think those things that were supposed to make things better, they're not making them better. But I think historically, if you chart it, there are great progresses that we have made on the planet. They just don't translate into individual satisfaction. That's what I'd say about it.
No, I think that's a good assessment. I, in general, believe the world is getting much better, even though at any given moment it sure feels like it's on fire. Right. The problem is we're so close to so many of these things that it's hard to zoom out and look at things on the whole. And it's really difficult to zoom out and look at, when you say the world, well, the world's a pretty big place.
It is.
My little corner of it kind of has the same view every day, though, right? So you only tend to see what's immediately around you. We talked, my pick of the week a while back was the show No Reservations, Anthony Bourdain, and that was my pick, right after he died.
Yep.
And one of the things I like about that show, or loved about that show, is the sense that you get of how much of a better person you are when you travel the world and can see what other cultures are like and actually understand firsthand what life is like in these faraway places.
Mm-hmm.
And when you travel, then you certainly have a much better appreciation for the world that you have. So I mentioned it's easy for me or for you, Ross, to get kind of caught up in the mundane, just minutia of our everyday lives, and work, sleep, eat, repeat.
Yep.
Or what we consider inconveniences or troubles in our lives. If you travel to another country and you see what goes on there, all of a sudden you have a much better appreciation. At least I know a lot of Americans do, or they should, for what we have. And all of a sudden your, mundane, boring life doesn't seem so mundane or boring. It seems pretty awesome,
right,
in comparison to what you see in some other places. So it's all about perspective, and not being able to zoom out, or not being able to, you don't even have to leave your own country. Just go to a different neighborhood, go to different parts of town, go to another state, and it gives you a much better appreciation for what's around you. The other part is too, we're pretty self-centered creatures where, we think whatever's happening to me must be what's happening to everybody everywhere else at the same time. And that's just simply not true.
Right.
One of I can't remember the study, but Bill Gates, who certainly is known these days for his philanthropy and has done amazing work and affected so many people in a positive way across the planet. His foundation gives a lot of money to worthy causes, and they don't just throw money around. Their investments are tied to data that points them in the direction they think they need to go. And so the Gates Foundation last year, maybe a couple of years ago at this point, put out a study, and it was measuring basically this, right? Are things getting better or are they not? And instead of it being this kind of sense of things, it was rooted in data, and it would say, is this getting better? So you mentioned extreme poverty. The amount of people in extreme poverty today is far lower than it's ever been in recorded history. That's a good thing. And at the rate it's going, it will continue to go down at a pretty steady pace for however long it will go down. The amount of infant deaths and just the death rate, the mortality rate in general, violent crime across the globe. All of these things are better than they've ever been. The problem is there's the same amount of murders on the news tonight as there was last night. There's the same terrible headline in the newspaper today as there was yesterday.
Yes.
Right? And so that doesn't change. And unfortunately, the news and newspapers and even Facebook is designed to get as many eyeballs as they can get. And in order to do that, they have to satisfy the audience and what the audience wants. And clearly, a big chunk of us want this kind of news for some reason. And so that's more, I'm guessing, of a psychological issue. Don't get me started on that. I don't know. We'd have to ask a professional, why are we so pessimistic as a species, so.
And I think that's his point. That's the point that he ultimately comes to is, what are the input sources in your life, and with what lens do you see, the world? And is it, the lens of your family? Is it the lens of the news? Is it the lens of the latest tragedy? And, it is interesting when you do travel around, and I've had an opportunity to be in all different kinds of places. And, I have, been in West Africa, where it is definitely a third world country, and people do not have creature comforts by any means. And, sometimes they eat, once a day. And yet, man, there's a joy and a happiness and a lack of family conflict and all kinds of things that really mark those people. And I'm not the only one to observe it. Most anybody that goes over there comes back, and one of their, assessments is, man, these people are really joyful. And so it is interesting. So the way that this article ends, which I think is telling, it says the spirit of progress is also the spirit of discontent. And he's not throwing the spirit of progress under the bus. He believes the spirit of progress is part of what does make things better in a macro sense, but it is also the very same thing that brings the spirit of discontent. And
can you have one without the other?
Probably not. No.
To me, those seem, directly related.
Yeah, that's right. But the reason we probably in the West, sitting where we sit, we live with the discontent and do not celebrate the progress. And it's just a fascinating article and really stops to make you think, wow, where does my worldview come from? Does it come from the nightly news? Does it come from whichever network it is I choose to listen to, or political or sociological right or left that I seem to stand? How does that affect how I look at the world? And right now, man, whether you're on the right or you're on the left, it looks like the sky is falling, and it has for a long time in the West. And so it's just interesting that we are not marked by a spirit of optimism, whereas the rest of the world might look at the West, and particularly America, and think, man, that's where we all want to be. Everybody lives in a house and has an air conditioner and drives a car and all those things, and yet we seem to be one of the most pessimistic people on the planet.
Maybe we should work on that on the Fill in the Blank podcast.
Well, maybe we should. I'd love to do that. I think these are good conversations to have, and certainly as we do talk about, not just the technology of today, but even just our worldview of today and how it impacts the world of tomorrow, we all ought to be people who are thinking about that as we make decisions, as we consume media, as we, make purchases in the areas of technology and otherwise. How are the decisions we're making, affecting the world tomorrow? Well, so that's my fill in the blank check this week, Keith. It's been fun doing this podcast with you.
I think that was excellent. I think I think you're right. We should do more of those. And by the way, as I'm looking at our show notes for the show today, our two stories, terrible news about the new MacBook Pro and big American tech company being fined and treated unfairly by the EU. So maybe we have some work to do on spreading positivity right here at the Fill in the Blank podcast.
Yeah, Fill in the Blank episode 31 is going to be looking at the good news of the day. Hey, wanted to give you an update. Fill in the Blank is going to be taking a 3-week break as we finish our summer travel, spending some time with our families. And in 3 weeks, we will be back with Fill in the Blank episode 31. When we get to episode 31, we want to begin exploring some new territory in the Fill in the Blank podcast, and would love for you to join us for that. So be looking out for the next Fill in the Blank podcast, episode 31, coming in 3 weeks.